Yes, we can start. So let me just check. Yes, perfect. So I'm going to present an Ansible module actually for EasyBuild. So my plan of my talk is actually 4 parts mainly. It's just basically displaying a bit what is on infrastructure. Just basically, I see this more as how do you say it? I mean, basically explaining what we are doing in our field and more theoretical talk. So first, basically explain what the infrastructure is in our case. You basically have seen our cluster yesterday, so that will be quite quick. Basically, what wanted the issue I want to solve by creating this module, explaining a bit what is the solution and what is Ansible, of course, for those people we don't know what it is, and then basically going more in details how it works, what are some features they've included and stuff like that. So let's start by a quick overview of what we have here in the building I visited yesterday. So basically, I'm going to focus on 2 clusters. So our latest cluster, Mattelaer 3, and on Manback. So both are in the data center, which is here close by. So the Mattelaer 3 cluster has 80 Skylake nodes and 4 Intel Xeon nodes. So 2 different partitions actually, and for the user basically to have to choose between the partitions. Knowing that we have 2 different partitions is a bit funny, interesting actually for later, because there's a bug in Slurm linked to EasyBuild because of those partitions. And basically everything is interconnected with an OmniPath, and that was released last year. And that's part of this CISM consortium, so different university in Belgium, and that means we have to follow also all the guidelines going from there. The second cluster is purely local, so it's not part of the CISM, so it's just part of a university. And it's a bit of a mess of a cluster. So we don't have any interconnects, it's only gigabit Ethernet. We have quite a lot of nodes there, but from extremely various generations, various types of CPU. So we technically have 13 different architectures, and that means when I'm building the software, I have 13 different stacks of software to maintain. So that's quite a lot. And the main reason for that is how this cluster is created, basically. It's some people from university saying, okay, I have 5K, 10K, 20K, to put on buying the machine, and we say, okay, we can put it there. We create a partition for you so that we have higher priority, and that means basically you have new machines coming at random time. So it's purely a heterogeneous cluster, which is quite big right now, but basically we don't know when new machines are coming, and of course we're also removing machines at a bit when basically they are too old and we don't have enough space for them. So it's of course quite a mess to handle as well. So what are my goals here? Is basically, basically to have all architecture should have their optimized stack. So I really want to have EasyBuild compile in an optimal way for each of those machines. So that means I need to run EasyBuild, of course, a lot of times. And I want, of course, to have exactly the same stack on all those machines. So that for the user, basically, he doesn't have to care or have compile and install all those codes. He just has to know, basically, I'm doing my module load. And of course, I put the same mounting point for all, so basically everything is the same. Of course, in the disk, it's put in a different place, but for the user, everything is put at the same place. And they don't see or realize that actually we've performed different compilations for all those machines. And I said we basically have to follow on the Mattelaer 3, that's a requirement, and we follow it actually on the other cluster as well, the CC guideline that was presented on Wednesday, actually. So basically, that's all, if you can read it, or we basically structures the information depending on the machines. And that's created in a nice way. That's basically, we know that every time we have a new machine, we will not have any conflict, so everything is designed in the correct way so that we can add new machines at any time. So the way, and that's a bit important in the structure of my code, basically, the way we structure EasyBuild is basically we use a flat naming scheme, but with a trick, it's actually kind of hierarchical in the release. So we basically have one directory for all the release 2000A, all the release 2008B, 2019A, and so on and so on. So that is kind of a mix between a flat naming scheme and a hierarchical scheme. So that means I need to have really control basically of where I put my modules, because they're changing quite quickly depending on which kind of tool I want to install and for which tool chains. So in that, you have seen already this slide on Wednesday, actually, this part of the slide. It's basically all organizations of modules, which basically have a part which is simply, okay, you are now in 2017B, and you can change that and saying, okay, I want to pass to another release. So basically, with what I want to do with Ansible is basically achieve those three goals. So one, I want to be able at any time basically to add new machines in my clusters, and that means I need to recompile exactly the same software stack that I have on all the other machines. So I need to basically be able to track every installation that was done in the past and basically be able to redo it basically on these new machines. At the same time, and that's why Ansible is useful, I want also to recreate all the mounting point and stuff like that, so that basically has the same setup also for as the rest of the machines. I want also basically to be able to answer the request of a user, or I want this new version of Air, or I want this software which is quite old, or whatever. So basically I want also to have a code which basically I want to run one command, and that's going to run on all the machines to basically be able to install everything. And then that's something I'm not quite happy with the solutions, and you will see why in a couple of minutes. I want also to say, okay, now I want to press on a button and completely release, install a new tool chains. And that's where I think stuff can still be improved. So as from the title, and I said already a couple of times, I'm going to use Ansible to basically helping me in that situations. So Ansible is a Red Hat product, so it's used for software provisioning, configurations management, and deployment in general. It has a declarative language, and one thing which is extremely important for me is that it's idempotent. So all the functions are designed that if you apply the same functions 10 times, 3 times, it will always arrive on the same state. So you basically know that you can rerun your programs, and if something is already in a good state, then nothing will change. And that's something quite important, obviously. And it's extremely lightweight because there is no agent like you have in other codes, basically. It's just use SSH to connect on the machines. So this a configurations file, that's an example that's not part of my code, but not related to EasyBuild per se. And that's an example how you create directory, for example. So it's YAML syntax, and you basically say, that's a module basically saying, I'm going to create a file, which is a directory created by that user, and so on and so on. So basically, you put a lot of those commands one after the other. They call it as a playbook. And then you run on all your machines, on some of your machines. And you have control basically on which machines you are going to run and which machine you're not going to run. So basically, there's an example of part of a playbook where we have 3 different steps in this case. This step is not going to be run for whatever reason, actually. So there is condition also to run some step or not. So in this case, it's useless, so it's skipped. And you see here, basically, it creates a lot of directory. And here, it's basically checking if there's a local file or not that need to be moved. And you see it's run on 2 different machines in this case. And you have control basically on which machine you want to run and stuff like that, which is quite useful for us because you create a list basically of one type of machines for architectures, and then we say, okay, now you can run the same stuff, the same stack basically on those machines. And some part, of course, needs to be run on all machines, and then we can make adjustment. So you have many, many functions in Ansible. That's basically a list of all the functions. You can do a lot of stuff. And of course, what is quite interesting in this case is that you are also a way to include your own modules. So that's, of course, what I'm interested here to say, I want to create a module for EasyBuild so that I have an easy way to create a code. So this is not required. Basically, you can run EasyBuild without a module because it has also a shell, what they call a shell module. So you basically can run any command line on any of your machines. And of course, it's going to run nicely. That's not a problem. But of course, it's not really nice. First, because the code doesn't know if your function is independent or not. So the report coming from EasyBuild is always going to say that you change a lot of stuff, even if you don't change anything, because the module was already there. So you don't have nice report. And of course, in terms of you have one extremely long line in your code, which is not that much readable at the same time. So this is an example how you call basically the EasyBuild modules, and I'm going to look in details. So of course, now instead of saying file, you just say EasyBuild. So that's quite simple. You specify which package you want to run. So in this case, it's a small command just to install FOSS. So just saying FOSS. I've put a variable, so which version of FOSS I want to install, and that's it. So here, since basically the install path, module path, where I want to put my source changes quite often. Actually, the source doesn't change not that much anymore, actually. But basically, I've put those are real attributes of my function, so I can specify them. And basically, if I need any options of EasyBuild, I have these additional options where I can put any parameter I want. So I have a couple of parameters that I use quite often where I can specify explicitly. And otherwise, any other stuff that I use more, less often, so basically I put in additional options. So basically, if you need something quite often, you just have to create a new stuff, which basically create the line for you. Create the argument. So typically, at least in my case, I typically run all those scripts as sudo, simply because I also create mounting point, create new directory. So basically, I need to have the full control of the machines. Of course, EasyBuilds like to be sudo. So in this part, I just have to change for this part of the code, saying I want to run as that specific user, just to avoid any problem with EasyBuild, and makes a lot of sense since I don't want to destroy my machine as well. In this case, actually, we use one kind of standard trick. Instead of saying I'm running as my user, we create a specific EasyBuild user, which is called soft in our case, and it's basically that user that's going to install all the stuff. So quite typical. We also here simply modify the environment. That just because we have these hierarchical structures in our module, so I want to be sure that EasyBuild will never use the dependencies in the other hierarchical part. So basically, I force here what is the environment. And then one thing which is nice as well with EasyBuild, we can also notify other part of the code to do something when basically that is finished. In this case, we can rebuild the cache.
Changing of the environment, the module path is not necessary at all, because EasyBuild does that too. If you tell it to install modules somewhere,
yes,
that location will always be first in module path whenever you.
Yeah, but we still have the other ones, no? Because I already seen.
This is a hard reset. Okay.
Yeah, that's a hard reset. Because at some point I had some basically the 2018A, we was loading actually some module to the 2017A, but since for us that's hard conflicts, then it was an issue. So that's why I put an hard reset. But that's really, that's specific to our case, and that makes sense. But yeah, and this notify stuff, it only runs once per playbook, basically. By run. So that means that if I do 20 different installations in a row from EasyBuild, only one time the cache will be reset. So that's also something nice automatically. That's a feature was by, I don't know where you are, some of the people basically were saying, oh, automatically when EasyBuild finishes, we want to rebuild the cache. That's exactly it. But here we basically when all EasyBuilds have finished. So of course, we want to have this idempotent. That's not very difficult because EasyBuild by itself is idempotent. The module is already there. We are not going to do anything. But I want also to have the feedback that it's idempotent, so that we know to say, OK, that module was already there or not. And for that, basically, first I need 3.8.0 because it's nicely done there. But I need to use EasyBuild as a library. So I'm really in Python, import EasyBuild. And then I'm basically using the Python functions to check if the module is already there or not. So that I have a nice way simply to have it quickly and in a really reliable way, basically. You can also, you have an option in the code, in the long block of YAML stuff, you can put force equal true to basically bypass this part and always run EasyBuild anyway. So that means if you want to do something like simply recreate the module or any other options of EasyBuild for that, you should force basically to bypass this step. Otherwise, you will say, oh, that's already the module layer will stop. So then you need to force the next step. So that's basically, if you have installed something, you will say that will change. If it was already there, we'll do a nice report saying, OK, nothing has changed. You are already in the guide setup. So now if I really run EasyBuild, so this is just for checking if I need to run EasyBuild. If I need really to run EasyBuild, here I'm really reusing the command line. So I'm not using the API or import EasyBuild from Python. I'm just really running in the shell the full command actually. And that's for me is, we can discuss, but I think it's more stable because I know exactly that this command line will be quite stable API. And therefore we'll have a good, in terms of speed, okay, it's maybe a bit smaller, but basically when you run EasyBuild, it's so much smaller than that part that I don't care that much. One thing important is how I use a cluster. So the first I said, okay, now I know basically one machine per architectures, and the easiest stuff that you can do with Ansible is saying, okay, just run EasyBuild on that particular machine. So basically no minus jobs. You basically have one machine per architecture when you compile everything. And that's run quite nicely, obviously. And there's no problem on that. And now basically you have a new options. Doing that actually is put use cluster equal false. So basically you only run on the machine that you have tagged in advance that you want to run. Of course, there are a lot of problems. First, it's quite slow, because you only have a small number of machines. And the second problem is you have running that on live, basically, on the real cluster. You basically have conflicts with the users. Basically, you don't use Slurm at all. So basically, you are going to run on the machines where the user might have running. So in order to avoid that, you need to create manually all the reservations for you, and that's quite a pain. Or have dedicated machines, but we don't have that much machine, so we cannot really do that in our case. So of course, the solutions in this case is to use ---- jobs, because there you basically run on your cluster. You will run your jobs only if there is no user at the same time, so you have no conflicts possible. And it basically use all the machines available for that architectures. Actually, it will use the old machines at all. And that's the issue that we have to solve here. That's basically, when you use ---- jobs, we use the old partitions. And of course, in our partitions, we have different types of machines, so we need to select actually on which machines you want to run. So for that reason, actually, we restrict ourselves to Slurm. And basically what we do, we use the, the feature, basically, of the machines, which submit the jobs to basically tag, saying, I want to run all this EasyBuild stack, basically, with all my stack, but only on the same machine with the same stack, or the same feature. That's basically restrict yourself. And here, that's where we found the weird bug in Slurm, is that if you specify your partitions and not a feature, and that actually we need to specify a partition at the same time, then basically Slurm put all the jobs in all as admin, and therefore EasyBuild is not able to release the jobs. So that's, we basically are forced to say there that we want to use all the partitions available, and then it doesn't know why it basically go around the bugs. If you say, I want one partition, then there is no way. But we're going to look a bit more to see exactly what's happening, and probably open a bug report on, for Slurm on that, because it's nothing to do with EasyBuild, actually. But OK, that's the one issue we have a bit, and that's probably not also the fault of EasyBuild, is the wall time. Since we have different partitions with different wall time, basically the way EasyBuild determine the partition, determine the wall time, is basically taking the main partitions, I guess. And of course, we have partitions with smaller wall time, and therefore the job doesn't want to go through. So that's basically force us to specify what is the wall time. But OK, that's, I guess, again, nothing that EasyBuild can do against that. So that's small tweaking that you have to do here. And the last thing, which is we also have to find a small workaround, is basically with this ---- jobs for the Slurm one, EasyBuild stop directly. So it say, oh, I've submitted the jobs, and now I can go to sleep, and your job will be finished one day, and that's it. Which is extremely nice, of course, in most of the time. But here, since I'm putting that in the playbook, I want to be sure that basically all my installation of EasyBuild is finished before doing something else which might depend on it. So here, basically, I've added the module, basically, with just checking when my job has finished, so that basically I can be sure that when my job's finished, then basically that installations are either succeed or failed. And one thing, probably we discussed that on Wednesday as well, I still have to fix is the log path, especially when something crashes. I have no idea on which machines the crash had happened, and therefore it's a bit difficult for me to basically understand what's happening. So that's something, well, we discussions on Wednesday, so that's something I have to look at. So if we look at my initial goal, basically I can say that adding a new machine now, it's basically having that script written, and basically each time I want to have a new script, a new soft install, basically I need to add one of those blocks basically in my code. And basically adding new software, that's exactly the same. So as soon as I have a correct way to add all the software, this part is automatic, basically. I need just to rerun all the stuff. So the part which is less clear is how to create a new release from scratch. And the real problem or issue is that what I would like to do is basically saying, OK, create a new release, install new first, that's not an issue. But now I want also, basically in each release, we have all those programs installed. Abinit, Gramac, I put Gramac twice, actually, OpenForm, and so on and so on. So basically, I want to have all those programs. But of course, I don't know which versions, in advance, which versions of Abinit, which versions of Gramac will be available. So here I put just them in an abstract way, but I have no clue where are they in the release. And that's what is the problem. And the way I try to solve it is just to put a search. So basically, trying to search an EasyBuild file for that program for that release. And then if it finds it, then OK, it's going to install it. Otherwise, basically, it's going to, you have two options. Either you basically saying, I'm going to try with another tool chains with minus minus 5 tool chains, or something like that. But I will quite discourage actually to do that. So basically, I'm putting that option as false by default, but that's also a possibility. The problem there, obviously, so you can easily install a lot of programs like that, and that's worked quite nicely. The problem, of course, is that you have a lack of reproducibility. So simply you have a new EasyBuild versions coming out, or you run on 2 different EasyBuild versions. You might have new release of Hibernate coming in, and therefore you might pick another one. So one thing I'm thinking about the next time I'm going to use that part is to add basically, to create basically the list of files that are actually installed, basically the list of EasyBuild files that are actually installed. So for reproducibility, I just have to run on that list, but that's not done yet. So what I want to improve in this package, so the first thing is the log for the minus minus jobs. So that basically I know where my logs are in advance, so that I can basically look at them as soon as there is a problem. The second stuff is basically for huge packages like R, which are billion of external list dependencies, I mean, small packages that I install afterwards. And you can be sure that on those 13 different architectures, R will crash at least 10 times when you try to install it, because some of those extensions will fail for whatever reasons. And therefore, it's quite pain actually to install those programs, simply because you have to restart all the time from scratch, because the model was never created first. So what I want to slightly change is basically install those programs in 2 steps. First one, where this list is basically empty, so you are really only installing the main modules. And then after use with a full list with minus skip and rebuild, so basically I'm going to update once by once, basically. And the nice point here is that if it crashes at some point, everything before is kept. And therefore, I don't have to restart all the time from scratch, taking a lot of time. Any other questions?
People do this also when or try to do this to avoid and have to reinstall the whole thing from scratch.
Mm. Yeah, if you want to add one module and stuff like that. Yeah. Because, yeah. Or in one extension.
So something that a lot of people don't know is if you're building R, for example, and it's done 500 extensions and it fails on the 501 or the last one, like you don't have to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. You don't even have to change the easyconfig file. You just do an EB module only, which will do the sanity check for the main installation, but not for the extensions. If it's happy, it will generate a module, and then you can do a skip rebuild to just add missing extensions. So I've heard several people that restart the whole thing from scratch. You don't have to do that.
So and that's even better than this, or that's basically equivalent?
It's equivalent if it fails.
Yeah.
So if it fails, you do a module only, and then you go in and fix the extension and do a skip rebuild. But maybe we should just have a dedicated option that says skip extensions, or so then you don't even have to change the easyconfig file at all. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was thinking, I don't know yet how to do it, but with minus amend, I think you can put the extensions.
Yeah, but we should have just a direct way. Why not? Yeah.
I was not thinking to really change the EasyBuild file. I mean, physically, obviously.
Yeah, just
But okay, I didn't try it yet, but
may work.
Yeah.
Well, depends. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an option for that, that would be
you
even...
can just try amend extensions blank would work.
Yeah. So also I want to see, but that's more for the Ansible part, for the fetch, since basically I'm running on a lot of computers at the same time. Basically, all of them might try to compete to, I mean, if you don't do anything, to compete to download all the files and write them in the same place, which is not optimal. So the correct way is basically to first say, okay, I'm going to run with the minus fetch. So basically you have all the stuff. And then the second part which basically run this code. But that means that in Ansible we have 2 blocks, one for the fetch and one for the real installations. I don't think that's nice. I would like to be able to find a way to merge them together. But that is more problem on the Ansible structures than EasyBuild actually. So that's something I want to investigate to make it more nice. That basically this idea of doing the fetch first is completely automatic and completely transparent. And then I also want to improve a bit the support for user hook. Okay, so this brings me to my conclusion. I'm right on time, actually. So I have the code available here. So that's basically the Ansible module. That's a single file, actually. That's extremely compact. You can take a look at it, of course, and stuff like that. If you want to see a framework where we are actually using it, it's actually here. I still have to improve, actually, here the documentation and stuff like that. So it's quite minimal for the moment, and I'm going to do that. And basically what I did is create an Ansible module for EasyBuild. I hope I convinced you that it makes sense to do that. I will not say it's complicated or it's a revolution. It's just something was quite handy, and that's why I did it. For us, basically simplify your deployment, because it allows us basically to put it in the main stuff and don't have to worry too much about it. OK, thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. You already have fans in Spain who will start using the module.
Good.
Any questions for Olivier?
Well, I'm not sure if it's questions or comments or I don't know, but it's connected to this.
Good.
I also wanted. I didn't start with deploying anything similar to this, but that's something that I would like to do as well. But it makes a lot of sense. Now we have 6 different systems managed with EasyBuild, and it becomes kind of unnecessary overhead to do it individually. One thing I think where EasyBuild probably could improve will be for GCC core, for the stuff that is really not performant critical, and we were discussing that Alan and me yesterday. Maybe it makes sense to be able to have a clean way on EasyBuild to say install GCC core here and deploy the modules here, and then everything else somewhere else. Because that way you can reuse that across all the systems. You don't have to rebuild the full stack. You can rebuild everything from the compiler up, but you don't have to rebuild GCC core. And you can just compile the stuff there with the minimum instruction set that your machines need, and that would be it. I think that would be, to us, it will make sense. It's not critical, but it will save some time and it will save some disk space. I think Kenneth wants to reply to that.
So what you want to have is something like dynamic configuration based on what is being built, where it should go?
Kinda. So be able to have at least a few tool chains. Kind of like that. So to be able to have at least some of the tool chains, the ones that sit at the lower level, to be able to put those somewhere. It doesn't have to be fully dynamic. It makes sense maybe now that you start doing it. If you start doing that, why not make it fully dynamic? That could make sense. But the use case for me will be to be able to have that in a single place that can be reused across different
But that's maybe
systems.
something you can do with the user hook in principle, right? So for your system, you put that user hook saying, okay, each time you basically install GCC,
can't.
put it there. That will not work?
No, because the configuration is picked up when EasyBuild starts running. They will use the same configuration for all the builds it does. If you do separate DB commands, then it works, but then, yeah, you're just doing manual.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you're asking for is to reconfigure for every build and also have a dynamic configuration, like a Python script or whatever. Some way of declaring that for this, do that, for this, do that.
And support it. I mean, it's not just saying for this install it here and this install it somewhere else. It's you have to take care of where you install the software and how you set up the modules as well, and being able to see the modules on completely two different model paths, but make them play together at the same time. So that's something that I think could be interesting for this use case. For us, it would be interesting. It's not something critical, but it will save some disk space and some compiling time. Kind of makes sense to me. Another related thing, I'm talking about having different systems or different architectures. Sometimes you need to adjust the EC configs for different architectures. You might want to enable AVX512 or not, or GPU builds or stuff like that. I have no idea how easy it would be to implement in Ansible some sort of EC config templating scheme where you can have, instead of having fully or final EC configs, have something that you can template with Ansible and then install the.
So I have an option actually to modify some EC config on the flight actually. So that's there, but I wanted to maybe move to user hook when it might be more flexible actually. So I've already put something where you can say, okay, I want to change, or in our case, each time you want to install OpenMPI, I will need to basically activate the slum option, so I want to modify it in that way. So I've already some options in that directions, but I think that need to be improved actually.
Okay. Because what I had in my mind was something like having for each one,
so for each machine is different,
parameters, have that this is something that is going to be templated depending on the machine.
But that's completely possible. Simply also because in our case, if you're not using a EasyBuild made actually EasyConfig, basically we need to ship the EasyConfig on each machines because basically our home is different on, the home of our user is different on each machine. So it's not an FS mount, so we need to propagate that file everywhere so that basically when we run it, he has the file available. So basically it's very easy to basically change the file each time you send it as well.
Okay. And for someone that has no previous experience with Ansible, I mean, you have some experience now playing Ansible with EasyBuild. You think is the learning curve too steep, or is
No, I mean it's quite. I mean, I'm basically completely new. I mean, basically 2 years ago, I was a pure physicist with no experience at all in Ansible, in EasyBuild, or nothing basically. So I can say it's quite easy to understand.
Okay,
to run
cool.
It.
That's good news.
By experience, at least.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Just concerning these search EB false and true, I didn't understand the real concept because you can actually, with the items, you can loop over all the tool chains and loop over all the programs and install all of them, right? So why do you need the search path?
Well, for the search path is basically, typically you have to specify the full EasyBuild that you want. You say, I want to say Python, and then you say 2.7 something and so on. So here I just have no idea. I want to say that for 2020, for example, I want to install the latest version of Python, but I don't know yet which version of Python will be available at that time. So I just say abstractly I want to have Python, and then when I run the code in 2020 for the 2020 A release, it will find basically which version of Python is available.
Okay,
which is of course a bit dangerous at the same time because
I don't know, because we do something like that, but we don't do the search through, right? We do have our production list, and then we just update it. So from every time you're gonna make an update in the system, we update that.
Yeah, but you do it manually, I guess. So
yeah, we do manually because
so it's completely automatic and it has up and counts. I mean, I'm not advocating that's the best solutions. That's what I tried, and I'm not fully happy with it, but
what I'm a bit afraid is that today you run with one EasyBuild, and then you update the EasyBuild, you're gonna have a different tool chain, and you run again Ansible. You cannot actually reproduce the previous one because you actually new GROMACs, right? Or new packages.
Exactly. I fully agree. That's one of the downside I presented, and that's why I wanted basically when I was using that also to create basically a list of which exact EasyConfig I use, so that I can reproduce it after. Yeah. And that's an option which is missing for the moment, but I think it's quite important to have that part usable. Otherwise, as you said, it's not reproducible, and that's a huge issue.
Yeah, okay.
I fully agree.
More questions?
Sorry. You can configure basically EasyBuild, right? The way you run it, you can say the different style path and everything, but you didn't put options like module syntax and module tools. Can I make a future enhancement request or a feature request?
I mean, basically,
options.
I mean, the point is there's so many options in EasyBuild that it will be impossible to put all of them, obviously, and so I put basically the one I was interested in. But I mean, there are some others that I didn't show actually, like robot and stuff like that, which by default is true because otherwise it would be insane. Yeah. But basically, there you can put as much as you want and just basically to write them, and that's it.
But for things like this, you would always do the same thing regardless of the machine, no?
No, actually we do different machines.
But then why not dump that in a configuration file that's already sitting on the machine?
It can also be that. Yeah.
There's no reason to do it through Ansible. Just it's always going to be the same on that machine. So dump it in a configuration file. Forget about it. Yeah.
One other option we can use also is to basically only provide the configuration file, because we track we create a configuration file for each release in our case. So we could have done that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you, Olivier.